Now we get a French perspective on this major D-Day anniversary. Joining me here in Washington is Laura Mandeville. She is French and is the chief correspondent in the United States for Le Figaro newspaper. Laura, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
70 years later, how is D-Day being viewed in France?
Well, I think D-Day is still a very important and emotional date, and as you might have seen, you've got big celebrations taking place there. You still have a lot of people who lived actually through D-Day, especially in Normandy. So you have a lot of families welcoming veterans, maybe for the last time, because many of these veterans are getting old. You know, they're in their 80s and 90s, and you can see some family getting together again, and some French families saying, okay, this is my friend, the American veteran, we're welcoming him, he's part of our family. So it's an important date.
Right, and when we look at all these world leaders who've gathered in Normandy, especially, a leader like Angela Merkel, who is the German leader, how important is it that she be there? Because in the past, Helmut Kohl, for instance, who was the former German chancellor, rejected invitations to attend these commemorations in 1984 and 1994. And I was just looking here, and he said that he saw no reason to celebrate what others see as their victory in a battle in which thousands of Germans died a miserable death. So I guess this gives even more significance to someone like Merkel being there.
Oh, absolutely. I think for Merkel, it's a very important moment too. And I remember actually covering the 65th anniversary. I was accompanying the President Obama, who went to Normandy, in 2009. And before that, he had just gone to Germany to meet with Angela Merkel. And it was very emotional. She talked about that period and the importance of remembering. So I think she's totally has her place there. The fact that everyone is gathered, even Vladimir Putin, who is having a lot of big tensions with the West at the moment, he's there too, because, of course, remembering the contribution of the Russian people, their sacrifice, go much further than Putin himself or the policy that he's actually implementing at the moment.
Right, and this has been used as an opportunity by the world leaders to have talks, minimal talks, probably just pleasantries that they've exchanged, but they appear to have broken the ice. There have been talks between President Obama and President Putin. President Putin has talked with the new leader of Ukraine as well. He's talked with Angela Merkel as well.
Yes, I think it's a difficult moment because, there are a lot of symbols here. I don't know how much they went, forward in terms of getting to some kind of understanding with Putin. I'm not totally sure about that, judging from what he said, for instance, during his interview with the French TV channel TF1, because he's very much sticking to his ground, it seems, and nobody knows exactly what Putin is doing under the scene in eastern Ukraine. It's pretty clear that Russia has been the force, destabilizing eastern Ukraine, and that's still a very strong sticking point between the West and Russia. But at the same time, you have some dialogue going on. I think that President Obama did talk to Putin, but for a very short time, and they just exchanged a few words, I think, for 10 minutes. And I think it's also a signal from the American administration. They are not ready for a big dialogue until Russia shows its willingness to really act on the ground for appeasing the situation.
Right, and even those few minutes, I think, were a lot more than people were expecting. When we look at France and Germany, you had Germany invading France. Now these two countries are really the foundation of the new modern Europe. Are these two countries key to keeping the peace in Europe?
Oh, absolutely. I think that there has been a very old understanding that Europe, the new Europe, which emerged, from the ruins of the Second World War, was based on the Franco-German friendship, and that was the beginning of the European Union, actually the European construction. So I think that keeping together these two nations in a very friendly relationship is very important. It's a very close relationship. You have ministers from Germany coming to France to attend some Council of Ministers from time to time, and vice versa. So it's a very close relationship. At the same time, you have to understand that this time is a time of remembering. It's at the same time a time of crisis, and there is a crisis in the European Union, a lot of questioning about what we should do in the future. And I think some disagreement at the political level, with different countries pushing for different agenda, and that's interesting that at a time when we are celebrating the order which emerged from World War II, we are also in big disarray about what we should do in the future.
Right, and looking at the future, I mean, when we look at the devastation that was wrought on France by the Nazis, when we look at the trauma of occupation by the Germans, how does one explain the rise of extreme right-wing groups in a country like France? I mean, if we look at the National Front,
yes.
it just did very well in the European elections. We look at Marine Le Pen, she's done very well. She's claiming a big victory. How does one explain that?
I think that you have to explain it by the fact that first, the Front National, which is the party of Marine Le Pen, of course, has big roots, in extreme right, and it's an extreme right party. That's true, and historically, it's linked to an ideology which has been traditionally rejected by the French. But she has moved, she has moved the party to a different level. I mean, she's tried actually, and she says that this party is a party which is actually a party of patriotism. It's much more, I think, the rejection of the current elite and a populist party which is surfing and sort of thriving on the disarray of the population. The people are very worried about the economic situation. They're very worried of the massive influx of immigrants in France, and they are wondering what France is going to become. They are worried about the national identity, and I think that Marine Le Pen is much more a party, sort of coming ahead on the disarray of national identity than an extreme right fascist ideology, which is not, I think, present in France at the moment, or very marginally.
Right, in those conditions that you talk about, an economic problem in Europe right now, high unemployment, perception that there is a lack of leadership in Europe, etc. Those were the conditions that existed were at the time, 70 years ago, or even longer, in Europe, that gave rise to Nazism.
Yeah, you're right in the sense that the European project is also in tatters in a way. At least it's in crisis, and the fact that not only in France but in many other European countries, you've seen the sort of push of these populist or parties or extreme right parties is a signal that the European elites are in a crisis, and they have to question themselves about what they should do in the future, how they should reorient Europe to tackle this crisis. Because if a growing part of the population rejects the European model as it was defined, federalist, maybe it's time to redefine it. Maybe it's time to think it over and see what we've done wrong, what we should do in the future. I think you should not think that 25% of the population in France is becoming fascist. It's not a good reading of what is happening. What is happening is dangerous, and you see, for instance, in France, a growing number of people, for instance, very attracted by Mr. Putin, which is very bizarre, and I think worrying, because Putin is, sort of a symbol of an authoritarian, pretty dictatorial regime, and so I think it's interesting to see what kind of answer is going to be given.
Yeah, because we've heard that from a number of right-wing nationalist populist parties across Europe after the election.
Yes.
Laura, we're going to have to leave it there. Laura Mandeville, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We are going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll have an American and a Russian perspective on D-Day. Stay with us. You're on The Heat.